football, the backup quarterbacks. And if you haven't seen an episode of this yet, backups are never the focal point of any team, but here they are the main character because I want to know their stories. I want to pick their brain for their football knowledge because they've got the best stuff. And today we have with us, I'm really excited to talk to Drew Stanton. He has the unique distinction of being a Super Bowl champion with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and a member of the 0-16 Detroit Lions. He was a second-round pick in 2007 out of Michigan State, where he once mounted a 38-point comeback against my very own Northwestern Wildcats. You can see my Northwestern bennett back there. A record that is still the biggest comeback win in NCAA history. He played a little more than 13 seasons as part of 6 different teams, started 17 games, and he once broke a 26-game road losing streak for the Lions. Welcome to the show, Drew Stanton. How are you, Drew?
Hello, I like that lead in. That's a nice, I don't know how to encapsulate the 13 years. So a little bit more than 13 years does it nicely.
I originally had 14 because I was counting Tampa Bay, the little stint there as another season. And then I was like, okay, factually that's a little bit not right. So yeah, I literally in my notes here on my clipboard, I wrote a little bit more than 13.
13 years and 6 games on the practice squad.
There you go. So I want to start with a question that is very basic. I have my clipboard here. My last guest informed me that clipboard holder is really a misnomer for a backup because that's more of an assistant coach who is holding the clipboard. So I'm wondering, can you tell me, did you ever actually hold a clipboard? Is this really a misnomer? And what is a QB2 and QB3? There's different roles for them in the game. Can you kind of down? Can you break down like what's going on?
Yeah, well, I think I was both in my career and started out more as a QB3, if you will. And so you do have a clipboard, or at least I did. I was charting plays and doing stuff, identifying coverage. And it all depends on what the backup quarterback wants or the starting quarterback wants. And the backup quarterbacks, they're kind of fall in line. So for me, when I was in Detroit, we would chart plays and do stuff. And even when throughout the course of my career, then when I became a backup, I kind of graduated from the clipboard and then I had like the iPad, so
nice.
that became very official. But iPad didn't exist when I first got in the NFL. So, it's evolved over time. But I think for me, when I made that transition where was able to assert myself as a true backup is when I got to Indianapolis. And you really try to become an extra set of eyes and ears for the quarterback and really, a connecting point between all of the players on offense, the coaches on offense. And so I took that role very serious. I was fortunate to learn from some great quarterbacks myself, as far as Sean Hill when I was in Detroit, Dan Orlovsky, other guys that had kind of been able to carve out a role as a backup in the NFL.
Yeah. So when you didn't have since your career predates the iPad, what was it? Like paper photo printout?
Yeah, it was the flip. Like you'd literally be sitting there and be like, it's a pre-snap and a post-snap, and you're like flipping, trying to take pictures of the drive or waiting for it to print out. And sometimes you go to these road places, the printer's not working. Everybody be freaking out and they'd want to know what's going on. So yeah, no, it was an adjustment when we got to the iPad era, but nobody struggled with it more than Tom Moore when we were in Arizona, because he was so old school. He's been around coaching, the Pittsburgh Steelers and winning Super Bowls back then, that he would just sit there and he'd press it. You always have to have somebody like delegated just to him from the IT department so they could get it to swipe over or do stuff. So that's my iPad story.
I was going to ask if that was one of your jobs, is to be the person to help him work that thing, but it sounds like you had other stuff to worry about, and there was a tech minion devoted to that. That's so funny. Well, that's a great breakdown of the roles there. And so I wanted to ask you, when we talk about the words to describe a backup quarterback, you just said in 2012 was when you really started to embrace that role and become the true backup who is on the sideline, charting plays, helping, learning, being a part of that. What term would you want to use to describe your role in your career? There's so many words. Journeyman, I think, is in your Wikipedia bio and like the third sentence. Like, what is the word that you want to use to describe what you did?
I viewed myself as a survivor, really. I mean, use that as the lead-in, right? I was a second-round pick, but 2 years later, after the 0-16 season that you also mentioned, they drafted Matthew Stafford. So I learned what a business I was in. I learned that I was behind the eight ball, and I needed to kind of reinvent myself. I luckily had a great agent that gave me advice on kind of what I needed to do to be able to survive. So at that point, it just became okay, just try and make the roster. And I got a call from Scott Linehan going into my third year, and he was like, "Hey, I don't know if we're going to keep three quarterbacks." And I was like, "Oh shoot, I never even thought this was a possibility." And I was almost on the outside looking in. So I became very aware of how real that was and how precious it was. And I always say 95% of the people in the NFL are just holding on, trying to make a job year to year. The 5% that we see that are signing these mega deals and all that, they don't have to worry about that. For most of us, we are surviving year to year because it is truly a what have you done for me lately type of a business.
Survivor is a great word, and it leads me right to what I was going to ask you next, which I went onto your the website Spot Track, which follows contracts and how much money athletes make. And I was looking at your career earnings, and according to that website, it says you made about 31 million in career earnings, which is really incredible for a backup. And you had such a long career, and you just described yourself as a survivor. So I guess what advice would you give to if there's a young backup quarterback watching this, who's trying to make it and trying to be a 13 and a little bit seasoned quarterback? What is your advice to that guy? How did you
Well,
do it?
first of all, I don't think 31 million is accurate. If you go check it out, they had a couple of years. Hopefully, maybe I'll get some paychecks for to make up for the time. But
Yeah.
no, I was very fortunate to make a lot of money to do something that I loved for a long period of time. But I think after going through that experience in Detroit and realizing how quickly it can vanish is just make the most of the opportunities. But I also wanted to hang my hat on the fact that I was going to be ready for every opportunity that came my way. And so I learned to control the stuff that I control over. And the biggest thing that I had to do was let go of the stuff that I didn't have control over. And that's really hard to do. I mean, it takes a strong man to understand what that's like because in this business, everybody's trying to be the smartest guy in the room, the fastest guy, the strongest arm, always have an answer for everything. And when I became secure in who I was and how I wanted to operate and how I wanted to be known, I was less worried about getting accolades for that on the outside and more worried about earning the trust and respect of my teammates within that locker room, the trust and respect of the coaches, the trust and respect of the front office people, the decision makers. And really that started again with me just focused on the stuff that I had control over. If I had 6 reps, I was going to do everything I could do that day to get 6 reps and make them to the best of my ability. If I had 66 reps because Carson was sitting out, I was going to do the best I could on that and learn every step of the way. I mean, you can't be afraid to make mistakes because you're going to make them. Just don't make the same mistake twice.
Was there a point, and this might go along with what you just said, but was there a point in your career, and maybe it was the Indianapolis year that you just mentioned, where you said, you know what, this is a backup is where I'm going to be, and this is where I can make my name and can make my impact and be valuable? Because I mean, I don't know what your mindset was when you came into the NFL, but I'm sure you were striving to become a starter.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, when I was drafted by Detroit, the hometown kid in the second round, I was like, this is phenomenal. I get a chance to be around Mike Martz and learn from John Kitna and kind of ease into it. And then I get thrown on IR 2 days into training camp and don't even know what that means. Kind of learn the business side of it very quickly. And then again, never really got a chance to get my feet underneath me. Lost confidence along the way. Like it was a struggle for sure in the beginning. But then insert Jim Schwartz, and then more importantly, Scott Leffler, Scott Leffler was my quarterback coach my second year. That really started to help me learn about my mechanics, how to be more efficient, all of these things. Because I never really thought about that kind of stuff. And then next, I had the pleasure of working with Scott Linehan, who came in and he kind of reinstilled that confidence in me of being able to understand the offense, play within the confines. Granted, it was phenomenal to play with somebody like Calvin Johnson. We were the same draft class, and being around talent like that, it makes every quarterback look good. So for me, it was more about just kind of systematically taking what I could, learning from the people around me. And then when I was very fortunate to find myself in Indianapolis with no quarterbacks on the roster besides myself and one other guy, they drafted 2 quarterbacks. I knew they were drafting Andrew Luck, but to be around Andrew, to be in that organization, Clyde Christensen was my quarterback coach there who had a profound impact on me. The culture with Chuck Pagano, everything about Indianapolis just kind of reinvigorated my love for the game and made me realize, yeah, I do belong here in this league because there was question marks along the way. But Andrew didn't get there because Stanford was on the quarter system. He wasn't there for the majority of that season. So I got to be the quote unquote starter and take so many reps and learn through that lens. And you find different ways to learn as a backup quarterback. And I had never had the luxury of learning through trial and error. And so for me, I learned so much in that short period of time that catapulted me not only there, but I go with Bruce Arians to Arizona, and I'm fortunate enough to be a part of that, already knowing the offense. And again, when you're a backup, you kind of take a backseat to the starter, and you realize, okay, what can I do to fill in the gaps? What can I do to aid this person in being as good as they can possibly be? So there were so many things that I learned from each and every person that I was around, every step of the way, that I'm fortunate after 13 years to look back with some very valuable friendships.
Yeah. And I want to go back really quick to what you mentioned about the start of your career being kind of tumultuous in Detroit, and having a lack of confidence through that. I know Mike Martz really tinkered with your throwing mechanics that rookie year that you were thrown on IR. And I think you had said things like you didn't really understand why he was changing your throwing motion. And I just want to ask, like, did that ever happen to you again, like later in your career, where a coach was like, this is wrong, do this instead? And how does that, you mentioned the lack of confidence, but like, how does that affect your mental, like your mindset, and how long did that stay with you?
Yeah, well, I think I had to just flush it eventually, and it took a while. It did. And again, I think that as you learn and you understand things, especially for me, my rookie year, I get drafted to Detroit, and I'm learning from Mike Martz, and I'm trying to literally do everything I can to learn from him because he has an immense amount of knowledge, and he's
Yeah.
won Super Bowls, he's done all this, he's been a head coach, and he taught me a lot of very valuable lessons along the way. And some of it was, how bad do I really want it? Because I had to work for it. He changed my grip. He changed the way I dropped. It was never quite the way that he wanted it. But in his mindset, I think, or looking back, it was like, I'm trying to prepare you for the toughest of situations because they're coming. And so, again, you take that in stride. I think that it prepared me, because I would have conversations about mechanics and do different things and learn from people and talk to people. All the coaches that I've been around, I was fortunate to be able to pick stuff up from. Like I said, it's just hard because when you are thinking about your mechanics, then you're taking time and energy away from playing fast and understanding and digesting schemes and systems and defenses and all that. So, it was when Jim Schwartz came in, we would do walkthroughs, and I learned so much from him. I learned the defensive side of the ball from Jim Schwartz, and what he would do on how to break stuff down and distribution. Same thing with Chuck Pagano. He'd come in the quarterback room. I mean, the knowledge is there. You just have to be able to assimilate it and absorb it and then go out and try to apply it. And for me, I was just felt like I was sinking so fast that I never had a chance my first couple of years. And sometimes, like a lot of people, you just need a fresh start. You need to go somewhere else and get a true sense of who you want to be. And right, wrong, or indifferent, you learn from those situations. And 5 years in Detroit was tremendous. I loved it. I learned so much. Being there was phenomenal. And it prepared me and catapulted me on throughout the rest of my career.
Yeah, and I want to ask you, so while you were in Detroit, you had several coaching changes, different offenses, trying to learn a lot of change, disruption. When you look at young quarterbacks now, I mean, there's a few examples that come to mind of, just Baker Mayfield from the time that you were in Cleveland, the coaching changes that happened there. And I live in Chicago, and we have Justin Fields here, who is now learning a new offense in his second year. And the same thing happened to Mitch Trubisky here just before him. So when you look at that happening with young quarterbacks around the league, like, do you kind of feel like you know what they're going through? And do you feel like, do you see the same pattern of, I don't know, is it a mistake to be disrupting everything around a young quarterback?
I think it's extremely difficult to overcome that, right? I mean, you're talking about trying to become fluent in a language and then have to go out and be able to do it at a very high level and make split-second decisions and then actually execute that physically. So I wholeheartedly feel sorry for those guys because I've been in their shoes. I mean, I remember when I was in Detroit, and I was fortunate to be able to overcome that. There's certain guys that were either in my draft class or later on that just didn't have that luxury. I mean, Colt McCoy is another guy that comes to mind that was a higher draft pick that didn't get a chance. And I remember going up to him one time in Cleveland and be like, just stay the course, man. And now, you put your head down, you work, and he's still doing really well here in Arizona. He just got a new contract, and he's going to continue to play. So you're able to overcome it, but at the same time, it is extremely difficult because, like I said, you have different coaches, and take Baker for example, right? Different offensive coordinator, different head coach, different quarterback coach. Blaine Gabbert's another one that comes to mind. When he got to Arizona, I believe it was year 7 for him. He had a different head coach and offensive coordinator every single year for his first
Wow.
6 years in the league. And people are saying, well, no, this guy's a bust or this guy can't play. If there's no continuity, it's really hard. Now, there's guys, again, that have success stories that get the chance to be able to ease their way into the NFL and learn and have the same coaching staff or learn the same system. And it does really make a big difference because I remember even a preseason game I was in Indianapolis my first year after being in Scott Linehan's system for 3 years. Right. And all of a sudden I get in a preseason game and I make an offensive line call to adjust everything. And they all look back at me and they're like, what did you just say? And I was like, oh, sorry, that was a Detroit call to move the line all
Oh,
the way to the
no.
left and try and pick up that blitz. So, it's those things that there's carryover and crossover and guys you've been around. Like, we're all creatures of habit, and you have to try to sit there and internalize it and be able to convert it to memory. So to see some of these young guys, and there's different tools that I learned along the way of picking up offenses. I've tried to impart that to everybody that I've been around. There's little things that you can do to be able to train your mind and your brain to bring it up to speed as fast as possible. Because again, our tape and our film that we put out there, that's our resume. That's a reflection of who we are. And for guys like myself and other people that were backups in this league, you might not get more than 1 or 2 opportunities to go out there and try and show what you have on Sundays. And if you don't, you're going to find yourself out of the NFL.
What is one of those tricks, like one of those tips or tricks that you picked up on how to learn something really fast?
So the verbiage was really different for me when I got to Cleveland. It was a similar type of system, or even date back to when I first got to Indianapolis, right? Like, I would do flashcards, you do all this stuff, but for me, like, hearing it and then trying to then spit the playback out was difficult. Of like, okay, I want to visualize what's going on, so I would actually take my phone and I would sit there and audio record the whole script of what's going on, and then I would say it back and play it to myself, even though I'd hear my own voice. It'd be like, okay, explode to tray right, Z peel trap pass 5 boot right, Z squirrel X deep hook. So you've got to be able to recite that, and it's got to be like memory, right? And
Yeah.
I, like, that was one of the things that I had to learn with Mike Martz, because it is a full mouth full of words coming out every single time, because he did such a good job of shifting and motioning and adjusting and protections and all this stuff. And God forbid somebody was to ask you, well, hey, what do I have on this route, or what's this player? So it's like you're trying to process all of these things and do that. That I wanted that converted to memory. I wanted to know what was going on. And same thing with the game plan, right? We would take the call sheet and we would have like a quiz show in Indianapolis. And Andrew used to love it. He's like, quiz me on something. What's the personnel? What's this? Like, you have the ability to do that because, again, like, the quarterback room, it's a unit of men trying to come together, and everybody should be pulling in the same direction as a starter. If it's structured the way that it should be and could be, having a veteran guy in there that understands what it's like, that's been in the league, that understands all of the ups and downs that come with it, it should be completely catered towards the starter. But the caveat is, when your number is called, you've got to go out there and perform at an extremely high level.
Absolutely. I want to ask you, since you mentioned you've been in QB2, you've been in QB3, you've started some games. What's been the weirdest promotion or demotion in your career that you can remember? Either the way it was handled or just the situation in general.
Well, I got benched my first career start, so I don't know if that's weird or just bad.
Yeah.
So we had to go. I was in Detroit, and I was playing, and I was the starter and got benched. I threw 3 interceptions, I think, in the first half.
Ooh,
One got tipped, one was a bad throw. It didn't work out real well, as you could imagine. Hence why I got benched. And I just remember saying, man, like, it was such a hard position to be put in, but I'm so thankful for it. Also remember, then fast forward, for whatever reason, I played a lot against the San Francisco 49ers. So that was my first career start. We go to Candlestick at the time, and we weren't doing well, and guys weren't, a West Coast trip, and I was trying to get everybody like motivated and hyped up, and it didn't work, and I was nervous, and it was not a good ending. But then to come full circle and beat them uh, later on when I was with Arizona, when they were really good and rolling, it meant so much to me to say, okay, like, I do belong here. I do belong amongst really good quarterbacks and I can play at this level. But that was probably the weirdest, like promotion back down to demotion, back down to like, oh man, they signed Sean Hill that offseason. And I'm like, I'm third on the team now. And I don't know if I was like, maybe I could play in the CFL or something. I don't know. And then it just kind of worked itself out. And very fortunate, again, like I said, surviving for that long to be able to look back on 13 ish type of years is very fortunate.
Yeah. And a similar topic. Your answer to that just makes me want to jump to this part of your career. You go to the Jets and immediately they trade for Tim Tebow, and you're supposed to be the backup behind Mark Sanchez. And then you demand a trade. That's how you end up in Indianapolis. So in that situation, you mentioned when you're in Indy, you obviously know that they're going to draft Andrew Luck. That was very well known. In New York, do they tell you, hey man, actually we're bringing in Tim? Like, what is the conversation there? And like, obviously you wanted out and you got out. So we know how it ended, but like, how do you react to that? And like, what is it like?
I don't know if like demand is the right word because that sounds like I had leverage. So I had other free agent visits set up, and when I was looking to go back to Detroit, Sean Hill was also a free agent at that time, and so I was trying to decide, okay, do I go back to Detroit or I kind of go somewhere else? And I loved it in Detroit. Again, I had Todd Downing was my quarterback coach, Sean Jefferson was our wide receiver coach. Matthew was going to be there. He was the franchise quarterback. I loved everything. I just wanted a chance to move up the ranks and assert myself as a backup. So Sean and I had kind of been talking. So I go on my trip to New York. I also had a trip planned to go to Kansas City and potentially somewhere else. I can't remember where it was, but those were the top two that I really kind of had zeroed in on. And I said, man, if I can go to New York and I can play within a Rex Ryan type of scheme that's going to be fantastic on defense, if I can help Mark Sanchez, and if he doesn't cut it, they told me, hey, like you're going to get a chance to play. I was like, if I do that in New York, everybody will know about it, and I'll get a chance to really become a starter again. Because ultimately, why we play this game is to be the starter. It's just there's only 32 of them every week, so you got to, you don't have the luxury of dictating that. So it was, I signed, I did everything. I said, okay, guys, like I told Mike Tannenbaum and Rex, I said, I want to be here. I loved everything about that. Quarterback coach was phenomenal. It felt like the right place to go. And then get back down to Florida where I was training. We were about to have our first child at the time. And then the news flashes like Tim Tebow traded to the Jets. I had no idea. And so I always joke about it now that like I was the completion of the triangle though, because Peyton goes to Denver and then Tim goes to New York and I went back to Indianapolis.
Yeah.
And it was honestly a complete godsend because
That's
for
so
me,
funny.
going to Indianapolis, going to that situation, that organization, everybody involved, I mean, from ownership down, it was such a breath of fresh air. I mean, I remember going to New York and I go on my visit and I've got like a coat and tie on and they pick me up in a black car and I go to a really nice steak dinner. And then they fly me home and I stay at a nice hotel. I go to Indianapolis. I show up and I get this random text from the assistant video guy who picks me up in like his 1994 Honda Accord. And I was like,
Nice.
oh, this feels like home. This feels exactly where I need to be. So even though I, was a Jet for however long I was, I have no ill will towards them. Things happen. And I was trying to talk to Matt Cavanaugh, who was the quarterback coach at the time. He's like, I didn't know this was coming. And I get it, right? Like the year before the New York Giants had won a Super Bowl, they were trying to make a splash. And Tim is a fantastic guy. He has an unbelievable audience and, was still trying to establish himself as a quarterback in this league. Mark was a little bit of a question mark, but went on to have a really good career. Again, you're trying to make every room as strong as possible that you can. So I was able to go there and then redirect and reroute to Indianapolis. And that put me on a trajectory to meet Bruce Arians and then, finish my career with him.
I love how you describe the difference between the Jets and the Colts just by the car that picked you up. And I actually want to ask you a really quick question about that. So, I mean, you've experienced 6 different NFL organizations, and I think we can all tell like each one does very much have their own vibe. And it's interesting to hear you say like, ownership down, like you really can experience that as a player. It's not just I'm doing my job here. Like, I don't see anything else that's going on. So I guess my question is like, how obvious were the different vibes or cultures of organizations that you were part of?
Oh, completely different. I mean, when I tell people about what the NFL is, it's 32 different corporations operating completely differently, and it all does flow from ownership. Everything, you know, comes from top down, and from that standpoint, I've been around some not so great owners. I've been around some good owners, and I've been around some fantastic owners. And so, you know, it's hard to judge Tampa
Can you
Bay
can you
because I was only there
categorize?
for so short. No, I can't.
Can
I
you
am not
can
going
you
to do
put the
any of
teams
that.
in good, bad, or
I'm sure people
categories?
can probably read between the lines and know which ones. But I think also is within that, you see ownership around. They're visible. They're involved, but they're not too involved. Right?
Mm,
They're not meddling. They hire the right people. They trust the right people, and they stick with those people. And so you see that, but they're also not afraid to make mistakes. They're not afraid to admit their mistakes, and those are the ones that I've been around. Even if you watch the trend of the NFL, right? If these teams that are consistently doing really well, they might have a bad draft pick, or they might make a poor, head coaching or offensive coordinator or said position. Like they're not afraid to admit that, move on, and you have to. And unfortunately, or fortunately, however you look at it, with the new, CBA and the new rookie wage scale, well, not new anymore at this point, but that gave teams the freedom to kind of cut bait a little bit quicker. But I remember somebody told me it's easier to fire a head coach with more money on his deal than it is to keep a disgruntled fan base happy and try and get them back. So if people aren't showing up to the stands, that's your first sign that you're in trouble as a head coach, or there's going to be changes that need to be made because the fans are our lifeblood. The TV contracts are why we make money, why we're able to do what we do. So I think people that are aware of that and understand that, you see moves of why they're made and how they're made, and it makes perfect sense because if public perception is bad of your starting quarterback, of your head coach, of your offensive coordinator, the only one that can't get fired in the NFL is the owner. And so that's the best job to have. It's just, hard to get there.
Absolutely. You got to have $5 billion apparently. So we're all working towards that. You mentioned Tampa in your last answer and how you were there for such a short period of time, but I do want to talk about that because when I was researching for the story, I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even like realize that you had been there as I think it was like QB4 situation. So
Yeah. So I've been 2, 3, and 4. Yeah.
yeah, and then I think you were maybe helping out, obviously, with your experience, maybe in like a semi-unofficial coaching role. So can you tell me about how that happened? Did you think you were retired before the 2020 Bucks came calling?
I was retired. I just came out for a 6-week hiatus down in Tampa Bay. That's why I joke. I was like, well, if that was in like Green Bay or somewhere like that. But again, it's funny how relationships matter, how
Yeah.
communication matters. And so I, got a call Christmas Eve morning from Bruce Arians. And I was like, BA never calls me. I was like, he might shoot me a text of like, hey, Merry Christmas, kid, with like a little cocktail emoji or something like that, but never a call. And so I missed the call and I was like, BA, what's up? And I was like, I knew, because again, I've got a pulse of what's going on in the league. I knew that Josh Rosen had left and signed
Right.
off the practice squad to go to the
Right.
49ers. So I was like, no, surely he's not calling for that. And so he called. He's like, hey, kid, you want to come down here and help us win a Super Bowl? And I was like, yeah, I haven't thought about football all year long. I was like, I haven't put cleats on. I haven't put a helmet on. Haven't thrown a football. Anything. He's like, you'll be fine. You'll get to jump right back into it. Just come on down. And I was like, well, let me talk to my wife and let me talk to my kids and make sure it's all good. And so I started weighing the options and knowing how good they were playing at that time, right? I was like, well, worst case scenario, I'm down there 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Best case scenario, I'm down there 6 weeks and I win a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
But it also gave me an opportunity, as I said earlier, to reunite with Clyde Christensen, who is one of my favorite coaches of all time, just an unbelievable man, not only a coach, but as a man, I absolutely dearly love him. Blaine Gabbert was the backup quarterback there. I knew a bunch of players that had kind of shifted over there. I knew the entire coaching staff. So it was too good of an opportunity to pass up. Not to mention everybody's next question is, well, what was Tom Brady really like? And I was like, he was exactly as I had pictured and exactly as you had heard about him, just so meticulous. And so I was also curious to see that whole operation and to see how good that team was. And so essentially be a fly on the wall. I mean, I would do quarterback stuff, and I got up to speed very quickly with everything, learned the new wrinkles and nuances of the offense. But started throwing and doing all that, and it was fun. I mean, I was in a very low pressure situation, but got a chance to just be, again, a fly on the wall to see and touch and feel what it was like. Now, granted, it was in the COVID era, which was far different than anything. I mean,
Yeah.
we weren't allowed in the facilities on Mondays or Tuesdays. You were watching film on your iPad, but to go from where I was the week before to jumping into that, living in a hotel and watching a film on an iPad and doing all this stuff, it was such an unbelievable culmination of my career to be. I am completely done now. Like if the phone was to ring, there's no picking up on this end. I am happy, and with everything the way that it ended in Cleveland on a somewhat sour of a note, it was really nice to be reaffirmed in the way that I feel like I was raised in the NFL by Bruce Arians and that system. To see that style thrive and go win a Super Bowl was really neat.
So most teams will keep 3 quarterbacks. And sometimes the third is like on the practice squad and is not dressing on a game day. So was the 4th quarterback there? Was that a COVID concern? Is that why?
Yeah. Yeah. So I had
other
no
years that would not have happened for you.
Yeah, no. Well, I think they kept the rule as far as being able to
Right.
have veteran, because again, my age, I aged out of practice squad
Right.
a while back, and so through that, like there was separation, and we got there, and they kept us socially distanced and all of this stuff. I mean, they had 2 planes that they were flying. I was completely away from everybody else and all that stuff, and I was probably never more nervous that I have ever been in my whole career than leading up to the Super Bowl. It's like, if I somehow get COVID and I give this to Tom Brady,
Right.
I won't be able to show my face in public anywhere. And I was like, just stay away from Tom. If somebody else gets it, we'll be okay. But I cannot give Tom Brady COVID. So they followed all the rules down there. Everything was spread out and all of that. But luckily I didn't have to play. But in a really kind gesture, Bruce Arians called me up for the last game, because on practice squad, you're not allowed on the field. And so he called me up, and I just said, hey, BA, like, I'm here. Is there any way I can get on the field? And he was like, he's like, the rules are too tight. And so, like, it was the walkthrough before the Super Bowl. He said, hey, I found a way to get you up, kid. I'm going to be able to do it, because we don't need the COVID call-ups. We only need one of them. And I was like, no way. I mean, it was just such an unbelievable gesture, but I think also people don't get to see that side of Bruce Arians at all. It's this, like, it's this bravado and this cool guy. Like, he's, he truly cares about people. And for him to do that for me when he didn't need to be able to, again, to be on the field for the Super Bowl. And I had a clipboard then, was taking notes and talking with Blaine, because Blaine and I are really good friends. And so being able to talk with Blaine and dissect things and stuff. But that game plan was the most impressive game plan I've ever been a part of. I mean, it was bulletproof. No matter what they were going to try and do to us, we had not only one path to go down, it was a second, a third, a fourth, a fifth of, okay, well, let's try this personnel. And then if they have this, I mean, it was just so calculated. But again, that's how Tom operates. So to see that and to be a part of it was just such a neat thing. I mean, I still have the call sheet in my office of what we marked up and what we were able to do and change.
Are you in your office right now?
I'm not in my office right now. It's sorry.
Hold it up, please show us.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And when you mentioned, like, we don't get to see that side of BA, like, I literally wrote down, I was like, Bruce Arians uses emojis. Like,
oh yeah, no, he's a big emoji guy. But as far as like a soft side or like a kind care, like, people don't see that side of him too much, because he usually gets up there and he's known for cussing people out as opposed to doing that. But again, like, I think that's what makes him so special in the role that he was in, and being able to be a part of that was really neat.
So we have a question from one of our viewers that I want to ask you, and it really goes hand in hand with something I was planning to ask you anyways. Because when I think of you, I think of the RV that you made Baker Mayfield bring to Browns camp, because that was such a fun part of Hard Knocks that year. And I always remember that. And so this question is kind of related to that, from Kyle Teachman, who was watching, and he said, historically, there's an unwritten rule that QB1s give their offensive line nice presents for the holidays. So thank you. Is there an unwritten rule for QB2s? Do you take the second team offensive line out for dinner? Do you buy the whole quarterback room gifts, or what are you expected to do as a backup quarterback for your guys?
Yeah. Well, it's good to be known for the bus because most people here in Arizona remember my dance on the sideline on Sunday Night Football
We're
against
getting
the
there.
Cardinals. I'm sure we'll get there. Yeah, I figured that was coming. No, so when I started a handful of games here in Arizona, I actually bought watches for all the offensive line. But as far as a trickle down effect of the second team buying the second team, there's really not a second offensive line per se. In training camp, there is, but really they only keep 9 guys. They have some practice squad guys and doing different stuff, but there's not an unwritten rule there. As far as like a quarterback thing, again, like the camaraderie was so important to me in that quarterback room. And so we would do white elephant gifts everywhere that I was, and which is kind of a fun thing. And we'd always start with the youngest guy and then work your way up based off seniority. So later on in my career, I absolutely loved it. But Carson was older than me, so he always got like last pick. And so it was a fun time, and we included the coaches in it and being able to do that. So that was the answer to the question. I think all parts of it.
Very good. Would you remember a specific gift that you ended up with in the white elephant? Like, were these nice white elephants, or the true traditional white elephant, which is kind of like it's kind of random stuff?
So one year, my first year in Cleveland, it was like the most ridiculous white elephant steroid thing you've ever seen. I don't think I'm going to share that story because it's a little bit too over the top.
Oh no!
But yeah, I mean, there was like cool gifts of different things because I'm a huge wine fan, and so different things that had to do with wine. But yeah, I mean, a lot of it's just like cool gadgets or different things that were out there of what, all that. And sometimes you try and trick people, wrap things in different size presents or different things. So it was, we had fun with it all the time.
Nice. So you're really not going to tell us?
So my first year in Cleveland, I got a golf cart.
Wow.
Like a decked out. Yeah. Baker got a golf cart. That was his gift. Tarad had an awesome like 4-wheeler. And I got one of those like tabletop video game things that I donated to it. So that was the most epic year I've ever been a part of. And I won the 4-wheeler just because of like trades and all this stuff and the rules. And I looked at Tarad and I was like, Tarad, I've got 3 kids. I'm not riding a 4-wheeler. And he was like, well, I really want the 4-wheeler because usually you buy presents that you want to get yourself. So if you get it, you're not disappointed.
Right.
And I was like, I'll trade you for the golf cart because Baker got the tabletop thing. And that was actually in the quarterback room while we were there with all of like the old school, like Pac-Man and all that stuff. So that was the most, usually that is not the norm by any means. I mean, usually it'd be like, like AirPods or something, like some nice gift like that. That just so happened to be like Baker and Tarad like absolutely love Christmas for some reason. So Tarad was like, I got the best gift ever, man. I can't wait. I was like, I gotta step my game up. Like I don't know what to get. And so like I felt good about mine, but the golf cart is parked over there. So maybe like the next time we come on, I'll show you the call sheet and then the golf cart.
Yeah. Oh my God. That's awesome. You can be riding the golf cart with it. Okay. I'm going to share my screen really quick. This is the last question I have for you. You mentioned this already, so we're just going to watch it because, we have to remind you.
Golden Field too. Another guy who came into the game with that injury to Floyd. Along the sideline, that's Drew Stanton, the backup quarterback.
So awesome. So what was going on for you there? Like, take me into your brain for a second.
I don't know if I can. I still watch it and I'm like, man, is that me? It was like this out of body experience where there was so much at risk for that game. And that, like that was a good rivalry, and going into Seattle is so difficult to try and win. And so being a part of that, we were well on our way. And when we won that game, it gave us a lead in the NFC West of like, okay, like we got a stronghold at that point. And so it was a integral third down in the game. It was a perfect call that we had on there with the sprint draw, and Andre Ellington just was able to hit it. The man coverage and Cam Chancellor wasn't able to get him. And so I just found myself all the way down the sidelines, kicking and legs in the air and fist pumping or what, like whatever that was. my son was just asking me the other day. He's like, "Dad, can you do that dance though?" I was like, I couldn't even. I still don't know which part is sequenced where or what piece,
Yeah,
but
right.
like that's the beauty of professional sports, is to be able to be a part of that. It was such a neat thing because again, going into Seattle and not only beating the Seahawks, beating that crowd, silencing that crowd, it's such a indescribable feeling.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was gonna say, have you ever recreated that? But it sounds like nothing has ever excited you enough to do the same sequence of
Yeah, I mean, and those are all three of my moves wrapped up in one, whatever they
Yeah,
were, or how they went. So yeah, no, that was it.
that's awesome. Okay, we're gonna close with two quick questions. A quick hitter. So just answer this with kind of the first thing that comes to mind. Who is a backup quarterback in the NFL right now that you think has potential to become a starter, or you think is just a really good player?
I mean, I could go with like an easy cop out answer of somebody that's in a quarterback battle.
Yeah, right.
Uh Trying to think. I mean, because even last year when Mitch Trubisky was a backup, I was like, he's so talented, and
Yeah,
just in a difficult situation. Now he's found himself in a starter's role. We all think,
yeah.
at least. I don't know. It's interesting because I start thinking about different guys that I've watched for a while or think that are in a good role. I mean, I still think Drew Lock is, young enough to potentially get an opportunity if he
Yeah.
gets handed the keys. But again, like I don't think people are just going to give him that opportunity. Tarod's another guy that I played with that I know how hard he works. He's just, I mean, you talk about bad luck
The
and
worst
unfortunate
luck.
timing.
Oh
Oh
my
my
God.
gosh. And
It's
just keeps
terrible.
persevering and coming through it and all those things. So, I mean, he's always had to look over his shoulder, but just a tremendous guy. So he's the guy that I'm probably rooting for most, and I know he's capable of doing it. It's just
Yeah.
he's never been given the full opportunity.
Yep. Absolutely. Okay. We're going to do our backup quarterback challenge. This is the last thing I'll have you do. So 1 minute is going to go on the clock, and I have my pen here. I'm just going to try to keep up with you as fast as I can. Name as many backups in the NFL on current rosters right now that you can. And I'm going to put 1 minute on the clock.
Can I see the clock?
Oh, I'll give you, sure. And I'll just hold it up. I'll give you updates. I'll be like 10 seconds,
Okay.
20 seconds as we go. Okay. Are you ready? 3, 2, 1, go.
All right. We got David Blau, Mike White, Joe Flacco. Let's go with Trace McSorley, Colt McCoy, Case Keenum, Matt Barkley, Terod Taylor. Is Baker a backup right now? Baker won't be the backup. Sam Darnold, Philip Walker. Let's go out to the West Coast and go with Drew Lock will be a backup.
25 seconds.
Shoot, who else do we got? What other divisions? Andy Dalton. Did I say Trace McSorley?
You
I'm
did.
trying to think of different because I just covered the team. Uh
Come on, get the Bengals.
oh yeah, Brandon Allen. Yeah.
Okay, I'll give
John
it to you.
Wofford.
I'll give you Allen since you said it. And I'll give you Walford too. Allen Walford. Okay, these are all correct, I
You
believe.
put me on the spot and I started drawing a blank. I was like, I'm just
I
gonna
know it's
like go
hard.
across the
It's
nation.
hard. It's harder than you think it'll be. So we have David Blau, 1, Mike White, 2, Joe Flacco, 3, Trace McSorley, 4, Colt McCoy, 5, Case Keenum, 6, Matt Barkley, 7, Tyrod Taylor, 8. I'll give you 2 points for Darnold and Baker since we don't know yet. So that's 9, 10. Philip Walker, 11, Drew Lock, 12, Andrew Dalton, 13, Allen and Walford, 14, 15. So you topped Josh McCown, but a little bit
with an asterisk.
Yeah. So you're over Josh McCown. You're in second place now on our leaderboard. It's pretty good showing. Pretty good.
I'm trying to, yeah, now like I'm going through divisions. I'm like, okay, I could have gotten better, but oh well.
It's tough. It's tough because you have to have like the map of the NFL ready in your mind with
Yeah, I was like drawing a blank on like, is Chad Henne still on a roster?
He is. He's in
Okay.
Kansas City, right? Let's see.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
Kansas
he's in
City,
Kansas City.
I should have said Brian Hoyer. I know he's in New England. I should have gone with like the people. I was like, can't remember if Chad Henne was there since I'm not like involved anymore and I'm not like in
Yeah.
competition for a contract with some of these guys. I'm far enough removed.
Right. Do you have to monitor that like pretty closely when you're in it, like trying to keep track of
Not
like
really.
that?
I mean, you knew like, I mean, as I'm now thinking about like guys like Chase Daniels and people like that I kind of had a similar like,
Yeah.
we were all around like Colt McCoy now, right? Like his salary was about what I was getting. So you were always kind of aware of what that pecking order was because when free agency came around, it was like you either compete to be starter type of a guy that's good being a backup, or you're a straight backup, or you're a guy that's looking for an opportunity. So
Got it. Well, Drew, you were an awesome guest. It was great to meet you. Have a great rest of your day.
thank you so much. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah,
I'll talk to you
thank
soon.
you. Yeah, thanks so much.